Chapter 13. Square Eyes. Simone had logged onto the family computer just after breakfast while Mum and I stirred lazily in the house. The machine whirred into action and she forced the struggling beast to open up Internet Explorer to get her to the fairy smog message boards. Whilst the disturbed circuits growled to load her requests, she palmed through documents that she had in her hand. There were police reports on Argyle activity, and they were to be the topic of today's chat. The chat room finally opened and curtains closed. Simone adopted her screen name of Simone23. As the clock ticked over 7:30, the agreed upon time for the conference, 3 more users entered the chat. These had been Simone's friends for at least a year, even if she'd never met them. They were Poindexter86, XX Rocker, and Sportsboy2. Reading the names brought Simone to a physical illness. She hoped that to the outside world she didn't appear as cringy as a near-grown woman adopting the name XX Rocker. Still, these were people she trusted. They waited on her word. Sportsboy2 was typing. Simone could see on the messenger window. "Anderson says that Eva Argyle is in Melbourne," he said, and there was a pause to his typing, likely on his internet cutout. "Eva Argyle is in Melbs?" XX Rocker replied. Simone grumbled at the awful use of shorthand spelling. Note that Melbourne is spelled M-E-L-B-Z there. "Things are about to get a lot more dangerous in Melbourne, then," Simone said to herself, before typing it into the chat. "You take Anderson's word for it?" Poindexter86 asked, using a U instead of the word you. Just throughout this chapter, imagine that the spelling is awful. It's a visual experience as well as an auditory one. Simone hummed. Only a few months ago, Anderson had been just an anonymous tip to the Fairy Spog message boards. It was a warning that Hesslick's scientist would move his operations to Melbourne and draw Seneva attention to the city. After that became confirmed, and the Empire of the Black Suns had a base of operations in the city, Simone had no doubts about the man's word. Simone also had no doubt that the presence of Eva Argyle in the city had spurred the violence which I had come across. She pondered it now that the chat fell silent. Should she have tried harder to convince me against my convictions to chase the Seneva leads? Surely it was too dangerous for me to chase these beings. Had she led me into danger? "Of course I take Anderson's word," Simone typed to the chat. "He's got insider knowledge." "How though?" XX Rocker asked. Simone wished she was more critical, but without having talked to the man, she just believed Anderson. It was a strange choice. "Because he's always right," Simone replied, and the chat lulled once more. The thought of my meddling continued to nag Simone's thoughts. Humans can't see quattrobolts, which meant that I shouldn't be able to. She thought it likely that any day now I'd find myself between 2 Seneva, and a bolt of the deadly energy would sail straight past my face, and I'd have had no idea I was in incredible danger. The image was caught on a loop in her head, the bolt narrowly missing my face for 100 repeats until it finally collided, and my head exploded in a shower of blood, brains, and debris. Simone cursed, growling, forcing herself in the nightmare. She couldn't escape them, though. Ever since she'd discovered the Seneva, she knew that she had to be the one to protect regular people. The people on this message board believed it too, somehow. It was an unhealthy messiah complex, the arrogance of which was not lost on her, but it was warranted, because Simone could see Quattro. Her mind wandered away from the chat, which seemed to have moved on, to the first time she'd seen a bolt of the energy. Simone was about 15 years old, sitting in on the police station with Dad. In what must have been totally against protocols, she found herself beside Dad on the right side of a one-way mirror, watching an interrogation. Lost to Simone was the reason why she was there in the first place. Something about being sick, maybe. The man behind the glass was an Argyle gang member, being interrogated by another detective. The Argyles sat stiff in the interrogation chair, their eyes aflame in rage, their fists curled to breaking. They roared, banging at the table. The detective spoke. "Look, Michael, we have you at the scene. Your prints are on the weapon. You don't have shit on me. I haven't touched a weapon in years," they yelled, palms slamming into the table. From it, 3 bright yellow rings emanated across the table's surface, bathing the room in a cool glow. The man then punched at the air, a 3-ringed bullet of energy screaming from his hand. It thumped against the glass, rocking the mirror in its frame. Simone threw herself back in fright, clutching to the back wall as yellow rings cascaded across the mirrored screen. She remembered how calmly her father returned to her, and how pointed of a look he gave her. Nobody else in the room even twitched a muscle. That was when she knew her sight was inhuman, and that was when she had started her research. "What did you call the meeting for today?" XX Rocker asked Simone in the chat. Simone flicked through the files again in her hand. These were her father's own cases. She'd stolen them, and she'd found them shocking. "There's intense police corruption. or some other kind of collusion for cases involving the Argyle gang members, Simone typed to the chat. She wasn't particularly in the mood to defame her dead father, a man who could not defend himself, but she found her revelations important nonetheless. I've got a number of complete police case files relating to Argyle gang activities on hand, and in each and every report there is a calculated effort to remove any mention of the Snaver and mentions of the Snaver abilities. There's a lie to account for almost every supernatural action. Well, that's not good, Sportsboy2 added. No, it's not, Simone continued. That means that the Snaver really do have some control over our legal system. It's worse than we feared. They've already got their roots. Who knows what they can do now? Simone shivered just thinking about the possibilities. Then a curiosity hit her. How had her father even apprehended any Argyles to begin with? It's not like they'd neutralized them to bring them in. She'd seen a stray bolt of Quattro fly in an interrogation room. Wouldn't the dangerous Snaver have weapons and abilities which would make them impossible to catch? Weren't they impervious to bullets also? With super strength to boot? There must be a Snaver in the Force too, Simone theorized to the chat. Otherwise there'd be no apprehended Snaver in the first place. Yes, that was a correct thought. Dad probably worked with these corrupt cops too. Clearly he had by his writing. That was sickening. Simone was sure anyway that she was not a Snaver. Everything she learnt had taught her that. She had no connections to the world, no sense for Quattro or Snaver, and no soul or weapons or hippie spirituality which many of them boasted. She tried on many occasions to prove herself wrong. Certainly it would be easier to fight the Snaver if she was one herself. But she was not. Simone was normal. She just had better eyes than most. And so Simone had to be the savior. She was the only person who could see the danger. She was the only person who could know about this level of corruption. This is going deeper than I ever imagined, Poindexter86 added, with a surprised emoticon. I feel so powerless. What can we even do when they're controlling the police? Their crimes don't get persecuted. When will we have justice? Simone wished she knew the answer. She slumped back in her chair, face powdered. She might have been able to see the flying bolts of Quattro, but it didn't help her to stop the Snaver responsible. Right now, awareness was her target. A solution would come. Hopefully. The door to the study creaked open. Simone's eyes bulged. She threw the documents aside, not wanting to be seen fondling stolen police reports. She was sure that it was a terrible crime to be caught with them, and minimized the tab on her browser. There was nothing more suspicious than a plain desktop, but it was better than what she just had on the screen. Hey, Simone, I said, entering the room. Simone spun her chair to face me, sitting tense in the chair. Could I see those documents, lazily thrown aside? She hoped that the room was dark enough to conceal them. I'm off to school. Just thought you should know that I took the last banana, I smiled, holding up the curved fruit. Oh, of course you took the last banana, Simone huffed, wondering what she was going to take to university today, now that I was going to abscond with half of her intended lunch. There was something off about me recently, Simone thought. Maybe I had stumbled across the Snaver. Maybe I'd been close to fatal danger and been totally aware of it. That would scar a person. In my eyes, she saw a sparkle, and she wasn't sure what to make of it. Okay, she said to me, that's fine, I'll see you later. Catcha, I said, and swung the door closed. Simone heard me leave. She sighed, swiveling back to the computer screen. She reopened her tab to see that the chat had soldiered on without her. Had I been scarred by what she'd led me to see? The idea haunted her. Simone was meant to be the savior. Did that mean exposing people she loved to things that they'd rather not see to direct their fears? It sounded obvious that people needed to know of the Snaver, but she wasn't willing to hurt anybody. Maybe that's why she'd been holding back this whole time. Maybe she'd hold back a little longer, she decided. There was still so much more to know.